Hi everyone. Today we'll be covering a topic like tough conversations with our guest Gene Hammett. He'll be soon releasing his book How to Have Tough Conversations, and today we're going to cover some of the fundamentals in the space. Before introducing him, I'll quickly mention that this episode is sponsored by Zinc AI, the all-in-one suite for recording and promoting podcasts and live streams. So, Gene is an entrepreneur, author, speaker, podcaster, business strategist, and coach for those that want to evolve as a leader. He loves helping organizations thrive in the chaos of growth, make meaningful connections, and drive positive change. Gene, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic, excited to be here with you.
Let's bring some hope to all the team leaders and decision makers that will be listening to this recording. And let's start with just outlining some of the basics of having tough conversations with a positive outcome for all the parties involved. Where should we start? What's the first thing a leader should?
I think the very first thing we have to start is maybe even back up a little bit and look at why we would need a tough conversation. The simplest thing I've found, and maybe it's too simple for most people, but you typically, when you notice someone is out of alignment with the work that they're supposed to be doing, maybe it's the company values, maybe it's an attitude alignment issue, but someone's not on the right track. My hope is that you will think, oh, what kind of conversation do I need to have with this person to get them back into alignment? And it starts right there. It's not, um, you know, being mad at someone and being frustrated and all that stuff. That means you've let it fester too long. If it's gotten to the point where you are, visibly triggered by this, and you feel the triggeredness, and you feel like a victim even. How dare they do this? I just got off a coaching call with a client, and he said 5 months ago, an employee said, "Yes, I will come into the office more often. I know it's necessary for me to do my job well." And he just let him go yesterday because he never showed up in the office. Two people are at fault here. The person who made the commitment to come in the office, it's an alignment issue, but then he didn't hold him accountable to what he said he would do and what he wanted to do as an employee. And so for whatever reason, he never came into the office again. He did his work as best he could, but it starts with assessing, is someone out of alignment with you? And are you willing to do the work it takes to have a conversation to bring them back into alignment and understand each other? So that would be the first place I would start.
Yeah. Or it's never it's never the leader's fault only. It's, as you say, it's both sides' responsibility. But the leader blaming others is a bad sign, as you're saying in the book, right?
Yeah, it's dangerous, right? We're entrepreneurs, right? We created our own value in this world. Not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone wants to really take on that amount of stress and turmoil and overcome those obstacles, because it's not easy in entrepreneurship. But we also have to be willing to engage other people to that mission and to the things that they say they were going to do. And so if you understand that just things being out of alignment are a sign that you need to have a conversation. It could be tough conversation, or it could just be a quick conversation if things are set up right, if the trust is built and the understanding that feedback is coming, which should be understood with leadership and team members and employees and whatnot. But I think it should be more explicit than sort of a passive understanding that we're going to give each other feedback.
Yeah. Or what happens next? A proper input was given, and a week later, we're noticing that there is no change.
Before we get into that, let me just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. You've read the book, which I'm going to hold up here for a second.
Cool.
Tough Conversations. My camera.
How to have tough conversations. Yeah.
There it is.
Now
it's backwards, but probably people can figure this out. The reason why we wrote this book is because there's an epidemic of avoidance. The client I was just mentioning earlier,
Mhm.
festering was the word he used. And I love the word because it really is not a very attractive word. It really does, invoke, this is not a pretty sight to look at. It's festering, right? And if we let things go for too long, people that are out of alignment, people that have a bad attitude, people that are not doing what they say they're going to do, they're not maintaining the trust and accountability inside of our the work that we do, it's going to fester. It will probably not get better on its own. It actually gets much worse, much faster than you expect. And we've got to really look at ourselves as leaders and go, my job is to help people grow. And these conversations are not, you know, tough in a sense. I ask people to change their mindset. It's an opportunity. It's an
Mhm.
opportunity to actually connect with this person and get them to grow. Imagine if 6 months ago, that one conversation, that employee who said, I will come in more often, they were very explicit with, it's 2 days a week or it's 3 days a week, whatever it is. And then they did it. And the person recognized that, the CEO or the leader, and these things don't fester. But when you avoid the conversation, it will get worse if you don't address it, if you're not proactive with it. My hope
Yeah,
is that even in the book, one of the tools that we created was the 4 phases. The first phase is a very simple conversation. It's not tough. It's the seeking to
mhm,
understand.
exactly.
And that's what happens before you get to the question you just asked, which I do appreciate that because I get it quite often. I already had the conversation and I didn't get a behavior change. Now what do I do?
Mhm.
Which I can answer that question too.
Absolutely. That was my point. And let's be on the same page and say that the sandwich technique often doesn't work, correct?
Right. The shit sandwich. I don't know if we
Mhm.
can cuss on here, but it's a common phrase that people use. When I first heard it, it was described to me as a softer way to give someone feedback.
Mhm.
Sometimes a softer way isn't the way. um, I don't think we should be giving every kid trophies.
Yeah,
The softer way isn't the way. Um, I've been talking a
very
lot about
often.
the book "The Obstacle Is the Way" by Ryan Holiday.
Right.
That's kind of where I wanted to bring that up because some of my
Sure.
clients are going through. They're all my clients work for the Inc. 5000 or work or honored on the Inc. 5000. So their companies are growing 20%, 50%, sometimes 100%, sometimes more every year. And that comes with certain challenges, and they're adding people. And every time you add people, there's more chances or opportunities for misalignment. And so you have to realize that. But back to the shit sandwich. Here's what it is for those of you who've never heard this before. Maybe it's the younger generation that's never heard this because it's not effective. I'll tell you why in a second, but here's what it is.
Mhm.
You give a compliment and then you give feedback, constructive feedback or whatever it may be, and then you give another compliment. And so the compliments of the bread on the sandwich and then the meat, if you will, is in the middle.
Mhm.
And that's what you really wanted to say was the meat, the core of the issue. And I bring this up because people think that it's a good way to ease into the conversation because you're giving a compliment and then you exit the conversation with another compliment. But what we typically hear is employees that have these conversations, many of them only hear the compliments. They don't even hear the criticism.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's not the point for you even being there. You're trying to make it easier on yourself. So the antidote to that is to be able to look at this and go, you know what? Let's separate these things. The compliments should definitely come. The praise for what they're doing well should be a part of our conversations with people because you don't want to be the leader who only talks about the bad thing. If someone says, come in my office and they shut the door, you realize you might be in trouble. Um, you don't want that kind of reputation. You want the reputation that you mean the best for people. And
Mhm.
sometimes that means, and again, there's another chapter in the book, making deposits in the Goodwill Bank, giving
Exactly.
those praise, uh, timely praise and specific praise. But that's not why we're here. The shit sandwich is really meant to highlight a very older way to engage in these conversations. What we actually recommend is for you to make a plan and really understand what the core issue is and answer any of the questions that are in the book. Like, we really designed this to guide you through the practical aspects of this. And there's probably a dozen different questions, and there's more that we could have added for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you make that plan, and then you plan your entry into the conversation. And the entry point formula is in the book. I would show you if I could, but I won't. I won't. I'm a very visual person, so I feel like I want to show everyone. But in the book, there's 4 phases, and the very first one is understand and clarify.
I could
And
probably share the screen and we can still display it.
uh, let me
But
bring.
it's a
I can.
screenshot in my notes I did, not the actual book, if you'd
Yeah,
like.
I've got the screenshot of the framework.
Hmm.
And maybe I jumped ahead because I get so excited with this. So I won't show it. If you want to show it, we
Okay.
can. We were talking about the entry point formula.
Yeah.
There's 4 elements to it. I'm not going to unpack it today, but I feel like the first 2 minutes, maybe the first 30 seconds of a tough conversation needs to be planned out, rehearsed. It needs to be direct. One of the lines I use is, "This is serious."
Yeah.
Why do I use that line? Because there wouldn't be a tough conversation if it wasn't serious.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it can be the first conversation. "Hey, this is serious. I've noticed that your attitude is a little bit off. Can we talk about what's going on?"
Hmm.
You never know what's going on. And in the first phase, it's you asking questions to seek to understand and then clarify what your expectations are. And so the shit sandwich is horse shit. But what really does work is you making a plan, being very intentional about your words, about the real issue, which we might want to talk about that too, because most people get that wrong. They talk about the symptoms, not the real issue. And then
Exactly.
it's having direct words that get the person to lean in to this opportunity versus pull away. And I can't guarantee that people won't be defensive. I can't guarantee that people won't be, you know, irritated by you bringing this up. And I can't be blamed if people don't get it the first time, because none of these tough conversations I've seen really get taken care of in one conversation. It's a series of conversation. The first conversation is where you address it, make it known. The second conversation might be, let's make a plan for this, how we will improve and how we're going to engage on this. The third conversation might be the encouragement meeting, which is one of 2 paths. I'm encouraging you because you are making progress on this,
Hmm.
or I'm encouraging you to get back on the right path.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so let me pause there for a second, because I know I can get really excited about this topic.
Okay. So yeah, I've been thinking on what based on what I've read, what else can help in improving the outcome of the tough conversations. And one of the things I noticed is actually being self-aware of the situation,
Mm.
being self-awareness. Could you talk about this?
Yeah, this is hard for all of us, even
Hmm.
myself. I've
Yeah.
struggled with this in different times in my life. Being self-aware means you're aware of everything that you're doing and saying. It could be as simple as your tone of voice. I don't know if anyone is married. I'm married for 22 years this year, and my wife will speak to me sometimes in a tone of voice that she's not aware of. She's
Hmm.
being strong, that's what she thinks, or being just clear, and it comes off as she's mad at me. And if I call her on it, she goes, "Oh, I'm not mad." I'm like, "Tell your voice that." And it's a little bit of playfulness between us, married people,
Yeah.
and many people probably understand this. But the real reality of it is we don't really know how we sound to others. We know the word choice, but how does that sound get received by someone else? And also, it gets received by the mood they're in. So if they're already a little bit of a defensive, or they're frustrated or whatnot, they're going to hear tone, and that's a different form of self-awareness, but they both play together. Other parts of self-awareness are like blind spot issues.
Oh, that's
I've grown
yeah.
because I've been willing to stand in the truth of my blind spots. I hire coaches. I am a coach. I've been working with executives for a dozen years and working with teams and helping managers become leaders. And I am only able to do this because I have stood in my own truth and made very hard decisions about where I wanted to grow as a person, as a husband, as a father, as a leader. Self-awareness means you're willing to do that work, introspective. You're willing to ask yourself the hard questions, or you're willing to engage with a mentor or have a conversation where you're like asking for feedback. More leaders should ask their employees, how am I doing?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't have anything to say, probe even harder and say, if I can improve in one area, where would that be? I'll give you an example. I
Mhm.
did a 360 feedback for a CEO for a growing company, and I interviewed like 8 or 9 people on his executive team, and we had them fill out a form, and then I had a personal interview with them, and I pulled all the information together. There were 2 areas of improvement that were complete blind spots to the CEO, like the leader of this company. The first one was he shows up late to meetings. His response was, I'm busy and I have back-to-back meetings, and sometimes they run long, and I am always running 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes late sometimes. And I said, okay, great, but here's the feedback. Everyone notices that, and you're disrespecting their time. He's like, oh shit. I didn't realize that they thought that. I was like, well, would you want them to show up late? He goes, no, but I would understand. He goes, but you do it all the time. It is a constant problem for you. So it's a blind spot.
Mhm.
The second area was when you're in the room, sometimes you're not in the conversation. You're not being present. And he was like, what does that mean? I'm like, what do you think it means? And so me being a coach, I'm willing to be reflect back like a mirror some of the things that are going on. In this case, I had direct feedback from his team about where he can improve. And guess what? He took it honestly. He took it, as a chance to grow. And my hope is every time that you have a moment of self-awareness, that you do grow from it, because that's your opportunity.
Yeah. Any efficient ways to do that? Tracking, writing some notes down, and
Yeah, you can do it yourself. I mean, you can reflect, you can meditate on it, you can journal on it. There's all these different things. But for me,
Mhm.
anyone else can choose their own path. I hire coaches. I hire people that are further along than me, that have some level of expertise in the direction I'm going, and I ask them. I'm being willing to say, all right, where could I grow? And maybe it's not even my strategy or tactics; those are easy to take. But maybe asking the question, what do I need to know to be able to grow to this next level that I don't know? Those
Nice.
conversations with a really experienced person are what I would call life changing. I could give you a number of them over my term.
Mhm.
I can give you the most heartfelt one if you want me to. And again, this is
Yeah.
even
So
dangerous to talk about.
you're proactively guiding your coaches. You're encouraging them to show you these blind spots, and yeah,
Yeah,
feel free to elaborate on that
and
story.
I do that for others too. Like I just had a call with a client right before coming in this. I've already kind of introduced it, so I'll just kind of keep this story going. I said, okay, you just exited this employee. Great. He goes, I feel really good about it. This is not normal. He's like, but I know I'm growing the company by taking someone who is not in alignment out of the team work, and we're going to replace that with a person who is in alignment.
Mhm.
Get it? And I had to ask him one of the questions that's in the book. How did you contribute to this? It's not a fun question, but it's a self-awareness question where you're like, um, he said I was going to come in the office and I never even followed up on it 6 months ago. I never sent an email. I never sent a text. I never had a conversation. And I go, you realize that would have been 7-second conversation. Happy to see you at work. Let me know when you're here.
Hmm.
And he goes, yeah. And I'm not saying you're done with that, but he was self-aware enough to answer the question, how did I contribute to where we are right now? From the perspective of growth. And we came up with three things. I need to be more intentional. I need to communicate more proactively. And I need to hold people accountable to what they're saying to do. Now imagine a leader that is honest with themselves and says, I have not done the job that I'm supposed to do in that area.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and this is what many leaders are missing to do on time, especially new leaders, new company founders. They learn by experiencing the negative outcomes of their like passiveness, or what's the word here, um, not acting when it's time to name the mouse, when the animal in the room is still small, not an elephant.
I've
They
never
also,
heard that phrase before, but yeah, you want to address things when they're small because I remember the festering thing. It gets worse.
yeah,
And
yeah. Oh,
so that's one reason why we created the 4 phases that's in the book, where the very first phase, understand and clarify, is such a simple way to engage because you're asking questions. The story that goes along with that really, highlights this is there was a tech CEO company, had a sales team, and the technical sales lead was a very good employee until one day he realized, oh, she's not as engaged. I wonder what's going on with her. And these stories started playing in his head because we all make up stories if we don't know the truth. And it's usually the worst version of the story. Is she looking for another job? Oh shit, our company is going to be in trouble because we're going to have to replace someone who's very valuable to the team. What am I going to do? All this made up in his head. And so he finally gets the courage to say, hey, just I've noticed that you're not as prepared for meetings and you've been taking more days off. Is there anything you want to talk about? It's a question. Well, I haven't figured out how to say this. This is her responding, but my mother's been in hospital and getting treatment, and I've been having to take her to the hospitals and whatnot, and the doctor's appointments, and I've just needed a little bit extra time, and I didn't want to bother anybody with it. And the leader goes away going, wow, why did I make up in my head? Because now I can support her. Now I can give her a little bit more grace and understanding. And there's no negative energy around that because she is a good person. She's taking care of her family. And we would do that for any employee out there. I would do it. You would do it. Most anyone listening to this would give people that grace because they need to. And all it took was having an understanding, clarified conversation to realize this wasn't really a tough conversation. It was just connecting with her and asking her, how can I support you through this new phase of your life? And then coming up with a plan, and then us talking about it, moving forward with it. That's a much easier conversation than you're not getting your work done. I need to fire you today.
absolutely, yeah.
That's a
Oh,
phase 4 conversation. So there's 4 phases, which we can talk about any you go in any direction you want to, but most people
yeah.
let things fester and they jump to phase 4 and it's time to exit. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's not very strong leadership. In fact, it's
uh,
very poor leadership because
I
you're
agree.
not engaging to help people grow.
I agree, and many people are not prepared for the next phases in general. I just want to say that we need to always need to replace pre-assumptions with actual conversations and connecting with people. So
Well
yeah,
said. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
So can we name the next phases? All four?
Yeah, the next phase, and it goes back to the question you had, a few minutes ago, maybe 10 minutes ago,
All
20
right.
minutes ago,
Yeah.
which was what happens if the first conversation you don't get the behavior
Yeah.
change you want? And this happens all the time. A couple of things are going on there. Either you didn't do the first conversation very well that highlights what's going on, and then you didn't have a plan afterwards to support that person and to hold them accountable. That's could be very true. It could also be true that you had a very good first conversation, but after 2 weeks is usually the slide back period where someone will go, yes, I will show up on time. Yes, I will be prepared for meetings, or yes, I will have a better attitude, or yes, I will communicate more proactively, whatever it is. And they slide back. And so in phase 2, it's called name the pattern. Let me be clear about this. This isn't name calling. This isn't being rude to the person. Um, I mentioned being unprepared for meetings, so let's use that. That's one of the stories in the book, if you remember. I just recorded the audio, so some of these stories are fresh, and
Mhm.
and we had to change the names to protect the not so innocent, if you will, because none of my clients are mentioned by name. All the stories are real. They just we didn't name the exact
Yeah,
name and names of
that's normal.
companies and
Yeah.
whatnot. So when you have an employee who fails to prepare for meetings, whatever that is in your world, the first conversation is going to be a seek to understand and clarify. And then if it continues, then you're going to have a name the pattern. And the pattern is not you're not unprepared. I think the pattern is you're disrespecting everyone else by not being prepared. You're naming the behavior.
Hmm.
So in phase two, it's a conversation that's still calm, still neutral, but it is naming the behavior and then talking about how this behavior is impacting others, impacting work, impacting results, and being able to come up with a plan from there to address that. The reason why this is such an important thing is because if I said to you, you're disrespecting the team, I would imagine it doesn't matter what your level is, whether it's CEO or just team member or somewhere in between, you don't want to be the person who disrespects the team. That's not your
Yeah.
identity. No one set out to be. My role is to disrespect everyone. So it hits them in their soul, if you will. I
Right.
don't want to be that person. It's not part of my identity. And so when you name the pattern and you do it well, they're able to take ownership much differently than just talking about the behaviors.
Right.
That's the second phase.
Hmm. The third one.
Where you want to go to the third one? Okay. The
All
third
right.
one
Well,
is
we can skip some parts.
no, we're
Let's.
not going to skip it. I just didn't know if I'm being respectful of what questions
Yeah,
you want to ask. If you want to go
yeah, yeah, yeah.
deeper, or so the
Well,
third phase, again, the first one is understand and clarify. The second one's name the pattern. The third one slides in before you exit. That's the fourth phase, which we don't even have to talk about that, which we can. Nothing's off limits here. But in the third one is be direct. This is the point. If you had an employee and it's just happened for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and you haven't got the behavior change, you might put them on a performance improvement plan. In the US, we call that a PIP.
yeah.
Make an acronym out of everything, which is just a formal document that gets filed with the HR team, and you review it with the employee, and it clearly states what you expect of them. Most PIPs are really designed around the work, right? The KPIs, the things you're supposed to do. And you don't have to have a PIP to be direct. You could have the conversation right before that, which is, hey, we've had 3 conversations already about this topic, and I'm noticing it hasn't changed. Here's my expectations from you moving forward, that you will
Mhm.
do this, and you will do it this way, and you will do it in a way that aligns the team and not repels them. Again, I'm making up these little stories, but you get the idea. In phase 3 is not so much about just asking them questions. It is explicitly laying out there what you expect of them.
Yeah, yeah,
Speaking
yeah.
in a way that they can't misunderstand is aspirational, but we should always be looking as leaders to sharpen our communication. And so when you're in phase 3, you're not going to be angry, you're not going to be frustrated, which those are very common because you've let it fester, or just you feel like a victim. You've been disrespected because they haven't done the things that they said they would do in the previous conversations. So this is where you draw the line in the sand and says, if it continues from here, we will have to look at arrangements to exit you from this role, this team, this company, however you want to draw the line. But that's what's in those 4 phases.
Yeah, yeah. And it's simply following the logic of the previous conversations. That's why it's actually I I was it was reconfirmed for me that it's important to keep track of the conversations in a written form, right? Um,
Yeah, I we haven't talked about that much. I'll just highlight that
yeah.
I think leaders, we wing it a lot. We have to. We're managing a lot of things. We're juggling a lot of things. We have a lot of people. And when we have these conversations, my hope is that if anything needs to be documented with HR, that you're doing that effectively. This is part of the framework. So there's, after the phases, we have the tough conversation framework, which has 10 elements to it. You want to make sure that you're doing the ninth part of that, which is issue documentation. Some things really do need to be documented and shared with HR and the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most things can do that. Even if you had a simple conversation about not being prepared for a meeting, you might follow that up with an email and copy HR. Hey, I really appreciate, Jeff, you leaning into the conversation we had today about not being prepared for meetings. I understand that we are going to do this and we're going to do that. And I'll check in with you on this in a week. So let's meet at Tuesday at 4:00. So why would we do that? Why would we put that in email? Because it's just, there's something different about it being documented.
Mm-hmm.
There's something different about it being in written electronic form, because we don't really write that many things anymore. And it's even higher when you've got a CC on the HR team lead or whatever that is. Oh, this goes into my permanent record. I don't know if they have that in your country, but when we were growing up and kids, everything they told us that we did wrong was going to be on our permanent record. Not everything needs to get documented with HR, but most things would, just to make sure we're building a track record of this. We know that they have these conversations. And if you've had 3 with the people, in California, we have very stringent laws on when you can exit someone.
Yeah.
And they do it to protect the employee. And the companies have to adhere to these guidelines. They have to understand them. And many companies won't even hire people out of California because it's so strict. It so leans toward the employee. And they're so scared of having to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, $50,000, $100,000 in penalties if they do it wrong. And so they very careful. And so one thing you can do is be in the habit of documenting your conversations. It could be in a notebook. It could be in your phone. It could be on your laptop, or it can be on your calendar, whatever works for you, but document what you agreed to. And I think if you take it a step further, you'll appreciate yourself. Document what the next step is. There's always a next step. And the next step could be, in a week from now, let's see what your progress is and see how I can support you moving forward.
Mm-hmm. As it's said, if it wasn't written, it never happened. So I think with phase 3 and phase 4, Gene, people who have some difficulties related to, struggling with their weaknesses, related to being attached to seen as the good guy, and they're afraid of ruining their reputation of being good people, positive people. And that's where these types of people will struggle the most with phase 3 and phase 4. Have you noticed this in your work with clients?
I'm a recovering people pleaser too.
Uh-huh.
That's what we name this.
Yeah,
and if you are stuck on being a people pleaser, you will suffer, in my opinion. You will try to be liked. You will not engage where you could. And here's the reframe on this. What if a tough conversation isn't about telling someone that they're wrong? It's helping them improve. Simple little adjustments. It's the same conversation. The person who's unprepared for the meeting, maybe they don't even know that they're not prepared. Maybe they think they're prepared, but they're not. And I bring this up because we want to make sure that we reinforce this every chance we get. We're willing to have those conversations to help people grow. If that's what you believe of what leadership really is, I think you're on the right track. Who do I need to be as a leader to help my team grow? Well, I need to communicate effectively. Remember the story I shared with you about the client this morning? He wanted to be more intentional. He wanted to be communicate more effectively, and he wanted to hold people accountable. All of
Mhm.
those are good things. It just happens one of the tools we use inside that is a tough conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's a chance for the leader actually to be seen as a higher authority. I mean, as a person who is actually caring, a chance to show empathy as well, and a lot more.
That's a great word right there. Empathy and caring.
Hmm.
When you, I know I quoted Simon Sinek in there, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said about this. And I can't remember what chapter it was, but you nailed it, and you reminded me to bring that up today. Your job as a leader is to be empathetic, which means you care more about the person than the output.
Right.
Now, some leaders may disagree with me, and I get it, but I will give you data behind this. I have done over 600 interviews with CEOs of Inc. 5,000 level companies growing the fastest in the top 1% in business growth terms,
Hmm.
not in revenue terms, but in the level of growth. These leaders, 93% of the time, when I ask them the impossible question, they will say one way. And let me ask the question. As the leader of a fast growth company, what's more important, your employees or your customers? It's an impossible question because both are required for these kind of companies. They're not no employee companies. They're not no customer companies, which I don't even know how that would work. But customers represent money, and many people will say money is more important than anything. Profitability. But these fast growth companies know something that most people don't really get. These CEOs will say it's the people that are more important. My job is to serve the employees. And if I do that well, those employees will take care of those customers.
Yeah.
And if 93% of people believe that it's people first or employees first, you go back and connect the dots on this and say, well, I want those people to know I care. And these
Yeah.
tough conversations are one of the best tools to let people know you care, because it's
Mhm.
easy to give someone praise. Hey, great job for closing that deal. Okay, great. But when you sit down with someone and say, hey, I know you closed a deal recently, but I've noticed something. You've taken your foot off the gas. You haven't keep pushing forward. And I just want to talk to you about it. If you're in phase one, you're going to seek to understand. It's like, what's going on here? And you're going to have a good conversation that has their best interest in mind. I did this with the sales team the other day. We had a sales meeting, and the guy throws up his numbers. I won't say who it is and what company it is, but he did a quarterly review. And so far this year, he'd only closed $211,000. And I asked him, what happened when you filled out that form? Because you're a rock star. He goes, I was embarrassed, honestly. And I realized I needed to work harder. I needed to close some deals. I needed to activate. He wasn't blaming anyone else, which was perfect. He said, because I did the work and because we shined a light on it, we held the up this mirror and said, he goes, I'm going to do this. Is he much more likely to get the results, or is the person who goes, you've got to close more deals and at all cost, which one's more likely to get the results? The first one.
Yeah.
Every time he took ownership of it.
Ownership. Yeah. I think some of your upcoming works are related to taking ownership. Correct.
Yeah, that goes back into my bigger body of work. So working with fast growth companies, and this was about 5 years ago, I interviewed 53 CEOs in about a 3-week period. It was a terrible time to do it. My first book was publishing, The Trap of Success. So it was that long ago. And I interviewed these people, and I didn't know what I was going to get. I was really looking at just overall business strategies, what industries they were in, and I was a little naive. But looking at the data, and I wrote this down on a physical piece of paper. I remember I had printed out a form, and so I was asking most people the same question, and I spread the paper out, and I noticed this word ownership was on more than half of all of the pieces of paper. And so I dug deeper into what ownership really was. And there's 6 factors that drive ownership. I thought this would be my next book, but it's not. I
Hmm.
did write a book that we didn't publish yet around leadership, but getting people to feel like owners is a big part of that. And
Yeah.
so, yes, ownership. That person who feels a sense of ownership, not just the founders, doesn't have to be a financial stake. I've had a feeling of ownership in previous companies that I worked for when I was, much younger. When I, not, when I'm an entrepreneur, so I have 100% ownership. But I felt like the work I was doing was helping me achieve my goals, and so my sense of ownership was very tied to building skills and getting the work done and getting the results.
Hmm.
And that's what we're looking for inside of our own companies, is people who are willing to take ownership of their work, to overcome challenges, to be able to be proactive with this stuff, but and to pick their head up and go, well, what's next? Not just put your head down and do the work. We want leaders that are strategic thinkers and that are developing the people around us and are proactive. That means pick your damn head up and look around at what else can be done, because we as owners do this all the time. The simplest example I can share with you this is my son will cut the grass. He doesn't own the house, right? I own the house. My son's 17 and he does it because it's easy money. And I want him to have a sense of work. And it takes him about 30 minutes to cut the grass and do all the little stuff. Well, he'll do a half-assed job. Why is that? Because he has no sense of ownership
Yeah.
around this task. But if I had a yard service, it's perfect every time. And I would pay 5 times as much. And my son would get nothing out of that. And that's the reason why I only have 1 more year of him being at home. So I get to get the lawn service after he leaves.
Hmm.
But I don't argue with him about it. I look at it. He missed a patch that was like 10 by 10, like not just a little stripe of grass. And I look at it every day and I'm like, no sense of ownership. But when I come in, I pick up limbs that have fallen down. I pick up pine cones, or I pick up things in the art. If trash is blowing around, I don't ignore it. Why? Because I have a sense of ownership around what's going on. That's what we want our employees to do, is have that same sense of ownership in the work. Not just do the work that's in front of you, but pick your head up and look around, support others, innovate, make things better, do more than what's expected of you. That's how you get promoted. And that's how you serve at a greater, and that's how people see you as a true leader. Hopefully
Yeah.
that's clear.
Absolutely. Well, clear, and at the same time, there's so many follow-up questions we can have after this talking point here. Well, you know, what's it's definitely the next logical question is how we can actually drive this sense of ownership, and maybe another important aspect is putting ourselves in the employee's shoes so we can see why they haven't done this yet. Having this perspective might actually help us communicate more efficiently and explain things. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be just related to payments. There should be much more. And you mentioned 6 factors. I know it's like a kind of like a side topic to the tough conversations,
Yeah.
but it might be still somehow related to having a tough conversation with someone who still doesn't feel ownership, and he's been in the
Do you
company
want
for.
me to share the 6?
I'm really curious about them, but
I,
if you
I
don't.
will tease everyone. We won't have time to unpack them because I could do a 2-day workshop on this with ease. So let's just run through the 6 things. So
Okay.
a sense of ownership is the feeling that you are an owner of the work, the project, the client experience. You own the goal.
Mhm.
Um, because when I discovered this, one of the questions I asked, I thought was a really good question. I would ask these CEOs, with your big growth goals, how do you get your employees to take ownership or take responsibility for the goals? If a
Mhm.
company wanted to grow 50% this year, how do you get every employee to take responsibility for that goal? And they came back to me and said, Gene, it's not about responsibility. It's about ownership. It's a deeper level of commitment. And so when I discovered that, I started looking at what are the elements that drive ownership. So here's the six. One is mission. If they're not aligned to the mission of the company, and I don't mean your ability to be profitable and for you to buy the next Porsche GT3.
Yeah.
They're not motivated by that. They're motivated by what you're doing in the world and the impact you're making with your customers. So that's mission. Another area is transparency. Remarkable transparency drives a sense of ownership, whereas people that are not open with financials or not open with strategic decisions, they don't have that. There's also inclusion. People that are included in the decisions have a higher sense of ownership. When you've been around the table and you've been a part of the direction we're going to go and how we're going to get there and what we're going to track, you have a higher sense of ownership. Not everyone can be around the table, but how do you include others in their teams? And those that are not included feel like they're not owners because they're outsiders. You
Yeah.
also have I know mindset is another one. Mindset is the area where it's a two-way street. You have to give them the power to take ownership, but they have to accept it. They have to realize, if I go back to where I worked for a .com in 99, 2000, 2001. And if everyone remembers the .com phase, it all blew
Yeah.
up on us. And I got laid off at 9/11 and I started my own business from there. But what I remember about that period of working with the .com was I wanted to work and have some stock options and all that stuff because we had raised a bunch of money and we were doing e-commerce. It was a fun job. But what really drove me was the desire to learn sales. I was working in the sales team. I was a technical sales lead, and pre-sales is what they called it. And I loved it. I got to see the deal develop over time, the relationships. I got to see what worked, what didn't, and I did that for 3 years. I had a sense of ownership in the work I was doing.
Mm. I can. I think now is the right time to mention that movie. Glenn Berry something with, maybe you know it, right? It was sales focused.
Yeah, Glengarry
So
Glen Ross.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a classic movie, and I told you it's one of your favorites. At least 20 something years ago, it was a movie that somehow inspired you. Yeah. Um, then, well, that was important. I was actually also planning to ask you about using tough conversations in sales. But maybe we can leave this for part two. I would be open to record another episode with you in 6+ months, maybe.
Sure.
Uh, so, and let's spend a minute or two on the future of tough conversations. We are not going anywhere in the future without polishing and becoming great at tough conversations, regardless of how technology is making it easier for us to run operations. But what are some of your own conclusions in the field?
So I ask question to my clients. So I'm asked the same question to you guys. As you grow your company and scale, do you plan to add more people to the company? If you really want to leverage your company to this, and I'm not saying that that's the only option we have, but if the plan is to add more people, then you have to be honest with yourself and say, am I going to have more conversations that might be challenging or tough? Or am I going to have less? Or am I going to have none? Like I do know people that are terrible at tough conversations, CEOs of fast growth companies. I remember one distinctly, and he's like, I hire people to do this for me.
Mm.
And so I said, well, what happens if those people are out of alignment? He goes, well, then I have to do it.
Yeah.
And he goes, and I hate it. And I go, well, why not get really good at it anyway? Why not be able to give feedback to people to get them in alignment? Because if you've outsourced tough conversation, I feel like you're not really growing as a leader. I have a theory. A lot of people say that the way that the business is run is by working on your strengths. And that's true. If you're really good at technology, I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg actually codes anymore or whatnot, but he's really good at technology. And that's where he's going to have this, and he's going to build a team around him in the areas he's weak. But I also believe this. True leadership means looking at the weaknesses, being self aware, connecting the dots from what we started with, and being able to grow in those areas. Because if you're not present for meetings, if you're showing up late and disrespecting people, you need to work on those weaknesses, because otherwise you won't be able to get the trust you need and get the alignment and get everyone working together for your big growth goals. Yes, you
Yeah.
can hire people to do this for you, but the future of tough conversations is every leader out there being able to recognize the opportunities, to have the courage to move forward, and to be able to have the conversations that bring people back into alignment, change behaviors, and get those people to grow. And if you can do that, you will have a stronger company. Because I know this, I work with fast growth companies. I've said that over and over and over. They're not static, they're not status quo. They are growing and adding 20 people a year, 50 people a year to their groups. And it is more complex the more people we add.
Mhm.
And so I just remind you that the future of tough conversations is you being better at it than you are today. And I will use this as a chance to raise the book up again and say you can buy it on Amazon. Um, I don't know when this is publishing, but right now it's only the ebook. In a few weeks, July probably 15th,
Mhm.
2024, we will have the print versions, the audible versions, and you can get it in any format you want it. But today, it's only 99 cents. It won't be that when we launch it formally.
Yeah, nice, Gene. Well, that was an invaluable input. Thanks for elaborating. So let's also imagine that there are some people listening to this conversation after the book was launched. They got a chance to read it, and they got inspired by discovering all these new universe of getting a chance to improve their tough conversations. Um, how else you can help and guide these people who might
Yeah.
want to get back to you and ask for some advice?
So I don't know if I can always do this, but I'm really do care about people growing. And again, if you're buying it when it's 99 cents, I know how much I make per book. It's 35 cents per book. I'm not going to get rich on this, but I care so much about people that if you download the tools that are mentioned in the book, which are really, they're already in the book, but we get some extra things inside the tools, the resources, if you will. You can schedule time with me or someone on my team to get clear about the next conversation, because every person's different. Every issue is different and it changes from time to time. And so maybe it helps to talk through with people. And that's what we do as coaches. And I would treat you as a coach and a client. I won't pitch you, but if you do want to do that, it is available. Right now, it would be me. You'd be getting me. But if we have hundreds of people do this or thousands of people, it won't be me. We'll have
Yeah.
other people in the team that can support you. But I will tell you, if you want to go further with this, you can buy the book. If you really want to support me, give the review, because that helps others see that it's valuable. If you find the book valuable, and I know it's a pain in the ass, I've got a couple of friends right now who have books, and I haven't written the review either, and I feel guilty about it. And I'm going to do it today. I promise you. There's two reviews specifically I want to write today, because writing a review for an entrepreneur who has put out a book or something like that, or a product, means a lot for future growth and how people access that. So that's the first ask, is for you to write a review. The second one would be share what you're learning with others. If you've got some benefit out of this, and I don't know if it's documentation or self-awareness or just the courage to engage, or maybe it's the phases, or maybe it's the the other part of the tough conversations framework. I don't know what it would be for you, but share it with another person. Talk about it. You don't have to tell them to buy the book, but you can say, this is what I'm learning. How would that apply in this situation, or whatever it may be? Because I also know that when you talk about it with others and you begin to teach others from the frameworks and the tools that are inside any book, it helps your level of understanding. So my hope is that you would do that if you find it helpful.
Mhm. Awesome. I can confirm that I already had a few conversations on the topic with a few friends and a teammate. Well, Gene, enjoyed recording this episode with you. I will looking forward to do another one. Let's gain some data. I will practice what I learned, And thank you for all the knowledge and the inspiration. Keep rocking on. Wish you a great launch of the book. I'll try to take active part in the reviews, in the promotion, and yeah, looking forward to talk again soon.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.